Hi everybody. This is the first lecture on making maps with GIS. This is part one. The reason it's split up into two parts is because it's a really long PowerPoint and it might take a little while to go through it. So I don't want to load up everything on one single video. So this is only part one. We really keep following the same theme throughout the entire lecture, but we're splitting it up into two parts. In this one, I won't be going over any examples of maps in ArcMap. I'm going to be showing you some good maps, some bad maps, some ways to improve maps from an artistic standpoint. So let's get going. Let's start talking about what types of maps are out there. First of all, what is a map? And as you see me look over here, this is where my dual monitor is. My webcam is right there, so you'll see me looking away. But as it says here, it's a graphic depiction of all or part of a geographic realm or area where the real world features are replaced with symbols. And the symbols should be in the correct location at a reduced scale. Now, some of you may have seen like these Galveston fun maps or Texas fun maps where they've got the general shape of Texas, and right where Austin is, there's a big UT tower or a giant looking Capitol building or a big star or something like that. And then over in Houston, there's a giant downtown area looking thing. It's not the scale. It's just kind of a fun map. But this is the definition of the maps that we will be making here. We want to make maps to scale. We want to put our appropriate symbols in the appropriate places, and so that everything is lined up and look good. We also want to make it artistic. We want to have a good balance, and we want to make everything look right. Now, the two types of maps we're going to discuss are the thematic map and the reference map. Thematic maps are based on a theme. It makes sense. Thematic theme. So it might be like a map, as you've seen some maps recently of the Ebola crisis in West Africa. That would be the case of a thematic map. The theme is the epidemiology of Ebola. A reference map helps you find places. It is a general map that shows locations of roads and cities, and the cities may have a scale-based naming, labeling, so that the bigger cities have bigger font and the smaller cities have smaller font that shows you where the rivers are and the places that you need to know in these maps. A lot of times these are your road maps and the maps that you might find in an atlas or an encyclopedia. Remember when we used to have those. Okay, so let's look at a thematic map. Now, this is not the best map in the world. It's kind of, there's a lot of problems with it, but this is the estimated number of diabetics per square mile. Shows you where we have essentially the highest population density of diabetics. Well, this map has some problems. One is that if you look at the population density of Austin, I think this is 2009, you look at the population density of Austin at that time, it's going to follow these same patterns. So basically what you glean from this is not that living along the I-35 corridor in Austin is going to cause diabetes. It just shows that there's a lot of people living along that corridor, and there's a good percentage of those people have diabetes. So, and again, it's not the greatest example of a map, but it is a thematic map. The theme being diabetes. All right, let's move to another thematic map. Now, we were talking about epidemiology of Ebola in West Africa. This is epidemiology of mumps. There was an outbreak of mumps in 2006. Who knew that this was going to happen again? Well, if you use epidemiology, which is helps you trace geographically what's going on with an epidemic, and you place it in a map, you can watch the pattern go across Illinois. You can watch the pattern of mumps cases move across Illinois. And so here you have mumps as your theme. Now, reference map, here's the state of Maine. Reference map tells us where Canada is, where Quebec is. It shows a specific type of boundary between the United States and Canada, a different type of boundary between the states in the United States. We see the different patterns for roads, the different sizes, font for states versus cities. You see labels for the roads. You see labels for the ocean and the Gulf of Maine. The labels for the provinces in Canada. So this gives you an idea of where you might be and where you might be going and how to get there, and some things that you can expect to come across along the way. So there's your reference map. So here are some things to think about making a map. What are you trying to communicate? What information are you trying to get out there? If it's where places are, how to get to places, then you want a reference map. Who are you talking to? Who are you trying to reach? What's your audience? These folks, you need to be able to communicate in a way that these folks understand it. A map for younger people will look different than a map for older people, adults. A map for professionals in a specific field, so let's say geology, someone studying where the fault lines are, it's going to have a different look than a general map. So here we go. I'm talking about audience here. 2 different maps of city water mains. This one shows information for the people who have to go out and repair this. They know what these little symbols mean. I don't know what they mean. But the folks that work in the field are going to know what these symbols, these funny little, whatever that is, this M's and this diagonal line and so forth. And the rest of us can figure out, these must be fire hydrants. So a water main map for the general public, if you lived here on Texas Street and you wanted to know if there was a water main going nearby, you could look at this map and say, hey, there's a water main here, but there's not one here and here. And you would recognize these as fire hydrants. And like I was saying a while ago, a map for geologists is going to look different from a map for the general public. This map shows the Placitas Quadrangle area in New Mexico. This map is a simple one. It shows you where there's some mines and where there's a spring, the recreation site, and it shows where you have some creeks going through and some different types of faulting in the area. However, this one, you not only have the faults, the streams, the location of the spring, but you've also got these, this is parts of thematic map right here. These greenish and yellow and blue polygons, those indicate the formation, the rock formation, and the age of the formation. So all of this QP and TRC, it tells you the age of the rock and which group of rocks that is. So this one's for the expert. This is for some general audience who might want to know where some faults are and different boundaries. All right, let's move forward. Maps can do these following things. They can give you, they're essentially a data storage, like an atlas. It's got data there. Data analysis. If you had some data from the census, you could find out what the population distribution looks like and what your demographics look like in the city. And it's a one-way communication tool. If you have a map, just a plain printed map, you want to be able to make that map answer the questions of the person that is reading it, because you can't, unless they happen to know you personally, they're probably not going to pick up the phone and ask you, what does this line from Houston to Liberty Hill mean? I don't know why you would want to, there would be a line going from Houston to Liberty Hill, but maybe, I don't know. But it is a one-way communication device. Now, when you're in a GIS or you have some of these online interactive maps, you get a little bit of two-way communication, but a printed paper map or a map that's on a screen on a wall is pretty much a one-way communication device. All right. So here are the parts of a map. This breaks down the parts of a map. Again, this is not a pretty map, but it's got everything that we need to talk about on it. So we're going to use it. Now, you will hear me use some of these terms interchangeably. For example, the border, sometimes this border here is actually the space between the edge of the map and the neat line. The neat line being this blue line going around it. Then this neat line is doubled. The neat line has got 2 lines. So you can have fancy neat lines with all sorts of squirrely things on it. Or you can have a single neat line, or you can have a double neat line like this one. But you have the border, which sometimes I call it the margin. So if you hear me call it margin, I'm not necessarily wrong. This is not necessarily wrong. It's just sometimes we learn different nomenclature for different map features. So you'll hear me call this border sometime. Most of the time you'll hear me call it the margin. Esri, the Esri product ArcMap generally refers to it as margin. Okay, we have a legend here. A legend is never going to be titled legend. In ArcMap, when you start making your legend, it says, it comes up with legend across the top of it. Even if you're working through an exercise, a pre-made exercise that I might give you, if it says make a legend and it's got legend on top of it, please go ahead and delete the legend. Alright, title, I missed the title. You should have a title on your map. It's very important, just like anything else. A paper, a report, a front page picture will have a title. Your map should have a title. So this is one of the absolutely required map features that you've got to have, is that title. Scale. You don't always need a scale. And there was one time in my life I would have said must always, every single time have a scale. Let's say most of the time you need a scale. A scale is there to tell you the size of things. It gives you an idea. The scale allows you to estimate by looking at this and looking at the distance between the western border of Arkansas to the juncture here of Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. You can look at that scale and glance over here and get an idea of how far that is. So in most cases, most cases, you need a scale. There's a few times you won't need one. You need credits. You need to explain where you got your data from, and often you should put your name on it if you're the author. And depending on who you're working for, if you're working for yourself, you want to make sure, if you have your own company, you want to put your logo on it perhaps, or some other indication that says, this is where this map came from, my company. Or if it's just you personally as a map consultant or a planning consultant, put your name on it. This one just says U.S. Department of State, and it gives the information on your data source. So you give your name, your source of your data, and you don't always have to put the projection information on there. It's nice if you do, but it's not necessarily required. But I do expect to see source of data and your name on it. North arrow. Okay, sorry about the little blip coming up with the phone ringing. So we were talking about the north arrow, and the north arrow tells you what direction north is. I mean, it's a pretty simple thing when you think about it. Most maps should have the north arrow pointing to the top of the page. There will be times that things just don't fit right, and you have to tilt things and point the arrow in a different direction. In that case, you want to make your north arrow a little bit more prominent than you would in other cases. When you are printing out a map, most people assume that north is to the top of the map. But it's not always, so you should always put some sort of north arrow on there. There are a few cases, again, that you don't need the north arrow, but for the most part, in this course, I'll expect to look for a north arrow. Some other things on here that you see, there's some place names, there's labels, like Alaska and Hawaii. This right here, where it says ground, that's essentially the paper, the background. I actually like the word background instead of just ground, but a lot of textbooks call this the ground, what's behind the map, what it's sitting on. Then the map figure itself is here. Now, in Esri, they will call this the map figure itself, you'll see it called data frame. And when we create data frames, there's a little place in ArcMap where it says insert new data frame. And that allows you, by inserting a new data frame, that allows you to have multiple different areas, geographic areas, to show on your single map. So in this case, we've got, if this were, we've got 3 map figures: Alaska, Hawaii, and the 48 contiguous. Now, if this were ArcMap, you would see, in your column, you would see a data frame for Alaska, you see a data frame for Hawaii, and you see a separate data frame for the United States of America. So these are all will be in your map view. If you switch it over to your data view, which your assignment's got a little bit on that, you'll only see one of these at a time, and you have to tell it which one you want to see when you're working in the data as opposed to when you're working in the map view. You have to activate the one you want to work with. All right, let's move forward. Come on, there we go. So we have lots of different media for maps. And one thing that's not on here, we've got paper, film, Mylar, which is that kind of plasticky stuff, a computer monitor, projection. We project it on the wall using a overhead projector type thing. Broadcast TV, you see that all the time. And remember that display is part of the symbolization. You need to choose your symbols based on how you're going to display it. Now, there's one thing that's left off of this list, and I'm curious if anybody can come up with that on your own right now while we have a little, while I'm talking about it. What are some other ways to, what's another media to view a map on? I can sing the Jeopardy song here. Give you some time to think about it, but you probably all figured it out by now. The phone. You can have a map on your phone. There's an app for that. There's a map for that. iPads, tablets. There's so many different ways to display a map now. And of course, that's going to play into your symbolization. If you were to look at Google Maps on a smartphone and look at Google Maps on your computer, they're going to look differently. Slightly differently. You'll see some differences. A lot of symbolization will be similar, but you'll see different choices in ways you can view the map, and you'll see a different environment from which you choose your layers and that sort of thing. So consider also phones and mobile devices when you're creating maps. Is this something that might go out in the smartphone? Is this something that might be a poster in a hallway? Is this something that might be a part of a presentation to the city council with a large screen up there that's being projected up there? These are all things to consider. In this course, you'll either be making your maps for handout papers, legal or letter size, poster size, which you'll do. You'll make it poster size, but then put it into a PDF that I'll eventually end up looking at on the monitor, or I may go to ACC and actually print them out as poster size so I get a good view of everything. So look at this. Which one of these is suitable for viewing at a distance? Now, if you were putting this on a poster, if there was a presentation being made and there were people sitting, let's say 20 to 30 people were in a meeting and wanted to view this on a poster in the front of the room, this is really hard to see. You can't, all these little lots and things, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you take the area that you're interested in and blow it up, they can actually see that from a little bit of a distance. Okay, let's move forward. So which one is suitable for viewing at a distance? Think about that. This is tiny. This is pretty good. Just things to consider along the way. And the more you do this, the more you think about, the more you make maps, the more you go through the process of doing this, you'll start considering these things on your own. It's like, who's seeing this? How many people are going to be there? What size is the room that they're going to be in? Is everybody going to have this on a computer? Can they access this at their desk with their computers. These are the things to consider. So here's the base data elements. External, things like titles, captions, scales, the source credit logo. That's what I was telling you about there in the bottom right corner. You might want to put your logo in there and other information. Coordinate systems, sometimes you want to put that in there, sometimes you don't. Graticule, that's a new word. Graticule right there. Graticule is your grid that shows you your latitude and longitude. If it's on there, then if you have the graticule on there, a lot of times you don't need scale or a north arrow. Sometimes you do. You've got your outside border, or the margins, what I like to call it. The neat line. Insets. Insets are those other data frames. I'm using the term that Esri uses. Here's your insets. Again, Esri calls those data frames. Any notes that explain anything, such as something like a caption that would explain the map and what's going on there. Internal. And I left out legend. Often the explanatory notes may go with that legend. Internal, you've got your landmarks, your boundaries, roads, rivers, hydrography, the water that's there at the surface, topography. If some maps show the hills and the valleys and so forth, those are all internal features. All right, base data elements. Consider what, where, and when. Unless it's a historical map, a map is almost always out of date whenever you print it, because it seems like there's always some sort of change going on. Think about earthquake maps. If you print out an earthquake map today, then next week it could very well be out of date, because there could be an earthquake any moment. In fact, they're going on all the time, but the ones that are 5 and higher on the Richter scale don't happen that often. So consider the when. Make sure you keep up with your dates, and you allow people to know when this was created. Subtitle. Do you need a subtitle? Do you need more explanation than your title up there? Captions. Those are not titles. Those are some of the explanatory notes. They're used a lot in journals and papers and reports. You put a map out there, and then at the bottom you explain what that map is. And again, it kind of taps the reader on the shoulder and says, hey, this is what this really is. We've got the title, but we need a little more explanation, so I'm throwing this caption in there. So not required, but sometimes it's handy. Legend. You don't have to explain every symbol. Sometimes there are things that you can leave off a legend. Sometimes if you can explain everything within the map, you might not need that legend, but more than 9 out of 10 times you need a legend. Symbols have a description next to them. Don't label the legend legend. You can either give it a descriptive title, such as location of airports, in this case, or land cover, land use, Travis County. You're gonna give a little bit of a description / title to your legend. Sometimes you don't need to do that, but sometimes it helps. And change the names of the data layers to things that make sense. I want to show you something about that, just right here. Number of goats, or numgots. Numgots does not make sense. There's a problem there. NUM_GTS. You want to go in and change this to number of goats. You also don't need these 0.0000. Who talks like that, right? You can round those off, and you can do that in the labeling. When I have another video that shows you some of the hints and tips and tricks with making a map, I'll show you how to do that. Scale gives you an idea of the size of things. You get a sense of dimensionality. Love that word, dimensionality. Not every map needs a scale. You usually use a scale bar, but sometimes you use things like 1 to 24,000, 1 to 100,000. That means when you see 1 to 100,000, that means that 1 unit on the map represents 100,000 in real life. So 1 inch on the map if you take and measure something out on a map by 1 inch, and go out and measure that same distance in real life, you'll find that that same distance in real life is 100,000 inches. So 1 inch equals 1 inch on the map equals 100,000 inches on the ground. But we usually use a scale bar. So here's a couple of scale bars. This one makes no sense because you can't measure decimal degrees. It's not a linear measurement, but Esri pops up with this decimal degrees automatically sometimes. So you need to go in and change this to miles. Also, have something that makes sense. You don't want, like this is broken down into 50, 100, 200, 300, 400. That makes sense. What doesn't make sense would be breaking a scale bar out 23 miles, 46 miles. You know, those people don't talk like that. You know, when you usually round up or down to 10 or 100 or something like that when you're working with a scale bar. 5, 10, 15, that makes sense. 2, 4, 6, 8, that kind of makes sense. 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on the size of the area, that makes sense. 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, that makes sense. But 24, 48, etc., 80, whatever, 90, whatever it would be. Math in my head, not so great. So here's some examples of scale bars. These are good for thematic maps. Remember, thematic maps are maps based on the theme, like the epidemiology of the mumps in Illinois, or land use and land cover. The epidemiology of Ebola, or that diabetes map. I keep coming up with these disease maps, and there's many more, but those are what's on my mind right now. So it's not as important to have this a precise measurement of distance on that diabetic map from the city of Austin. Where it is important is on a reference map. If you are, I'll be traveling to Arkansas later this month, and I'm going to have a map, and I'm going to want to know how far I need to go, estimate how far I can go before I need a hotel. And so I'll want to look at the cities that are there, and I want to look at the roads, and I want to get a good estimation of the distance between here and there, so I can predict, okay, I've traveled this far. If I'm traveling this far, this would be a good place to stop overnight. So those are good for reference maps, because reference maps are concerned with distance. Sources and credits and logos. Where did you get your data? You can borrow copyrighted material. We do that in this course. You can do that as a student when you, if you were working in the field and working at your job, you don't want to use copyrighted material without permission. Again, who made the map? And we'll talk about visual hierarchy in the second half of this video. Logo. If you're working for a company, you'll want to put your logo on there. North arrows. This is all stuff I explained earlier. They should not distract from the map. In other words, you don't want this big, gigantic thing that says north is this way, because it's not really the most important thing on the map. What's the most important thing on the map is your theme, or if it's a reference map, what you're referring to, your area that's being covered. So that's kind of low. You just need somebody, most people are going to assume north is straight up. So you just put a little north arrow somewhere on there that makes sense. You don't want to put it in some weird place like above the title or anything like that. It shouldn't distract from the map, so you don't want this giant thing. If you have a lot of white space on it, you don't need to fill it with a big, gigantic north arrow. If you have your graticule on there and you've got things labeled, that's your grid, and you see that you've got your longitude, it will show you that it's north. Your longitude measurement will say north on it or south, and that gives you an idea which way is north and south. So Here's some examples of some Esri North arrows. I generally like these two here, but that's my preference. And so if you're making a map and you put a north arrow on there that you like, go for it. I'm not saying you're restricted to these three. I never really liked that one, though. I guess it's kind of cute for certain. This is the Esri thing. They like to have those layer-looking things. Coordinate system, graticule. That's the graticule is your grid that shows on there. They might have tick marks on there. It might just show here's this latitude and longitude, and here's this latitude and longitude. So it may just have points around there that show you where the different latitude and longitudes are. Or it may be a full that you see all the latitudes, you see all the longitudes that need to be on there. So here's a full graticule. And this is what I was saying about when you look at your longitude and your latitude. Your latitude will say, I think I accidentally said longitude a while ago, your longitude tells you the direction that you're going east and west, and your latitude shows you if you're going north or south. So if you've got this on here, and you've got these things labeled, if this is 35, which I don't think it is, this is about 20-something north, and this will be 30 north, and this is 35 north, I guess that's 25 north, then you don't need a north arrow because it's marked here. You're in the northern hemisphere. You can look at your degrees and see that you're moving north in that direction. It gives you north. No north arrow needed. Okay, outside border, also called a margin, and your neat line. This is every cartography class, every GIS class I've ever taken. When I turn in a map, if I don't have a neat line on it, I got docked for it. So I expect to see these neat lines on your map, and it trained me to think like, oh my gosh, here's a map without a neat line. The map features are just going to fall off the page. And so it made me uncomfortable seeing maps without a neat line. So I expect some sort of neat line. There is a way that you can do that, though. If you have a background that's a different color than your margin, this area out here, then you don't necessarily need a hard black neat line. Your neat line can be the transition of colors from here to there. Now, that's some people like that. I'm okay with that. Some people are like, absolutely not. You've got to have this hard neat line, or it's not going to pass muster. So it's not the same thing as your data frame. Every data frame you have in your table of contents, so that's each of those map features. Remember, it's like I showed you a while ago, you've got Alaska, Hawaii, and then your main part of the United States, mainland. And so each one of those is considered a separate data frame in ArcMap. And each one of those will be listed in your table of contents. That's a sidebar down there. Naturally, it will come in with a neat line around it. Then you might want to, more than likely, put a neat line around the entire map to keep, like I said, in my mind, everything's just going to fall off the page if we don't have some sort of boundary around it. It's not, it says don't make overly ornate. Now, in this course, I like simple lines, double lines, triple lines, that sort of thing. If you take the cartography class, you'll be talking about different styles of maps, and you may get into doing some ornate, neat lines. But in this course, it's not too good to have it overly ornate. You'll spend a lot of time making it ornate and kind of waste your time. When you get in a cartography class, they might give you the opportunity to make some fancy neat lines. So here's your data frame. This has got a single data frame. Data frame encapsulates your map feature, and then the neat line, the main neat line, goes around the outside of it. And this is what I mean about you could have a triple or double neat line. This is all a part of the single neat line. You got 3 lines there. Okay, the inset. That's your another map with an inset within the main map. Can be large scale or small scale. Here's an example of an inset here. Shows you the location of Alberta within all of Canada. Make sense there? This is the inset. This is your main map. explanatory notes, just little captions and little notes that tell you what's going on there. You don't want to use too many of those to clutter up the map and make it too busy. Your internal base elements, you can't move those. If as it says here, if you don't like where the railroad tracks are on the map, you can't just move them because the railroad tracks are there. So you want to keep them there. So I'm going to go ahead and end this part of the video just because we've gone so long into time, and we'll pick this up later in the second part of the video. And I may actually divide this into 3 videos. As it turns out, it looks like it took me a little longer to get to this point than I was expecting. So we'll see you in the next video.